Me to go home. You with the smell on you of the charnel house, of flesh rotting and stinking in the sun.
Everyone remembers Lorne Greene as the calm, unshakable father of the Ponderosa, the man whose presence seemed to steady the entire frontier. Almost no one knows that, after just a handful of early episodes, he basically told the producers, "Fix this character or find another Ben Cartwright." At that point, the show was low-rated. Advertisers were nervous, and Ben felt like a cardboard lawman with a Bible in his pocket, delivering tidy speeches that rang hollow. Greene had spent years watching what empty words could do to people who were desperate for real answers. He refused to spend the rest of his life mouthing lines he didn't believe in just to keep a paycheck. That ultimatum didn't just protect his pride, it quietly rewired the entire series and turned Ben into the heart audiences fell in love with. But the fire behind that decision didn't start in Hollywood boardrooms. It began decades earlier in a freezing immigrant neighborhood in Ottawa, where a single spark could wipe out everything a family owned in a matter of minutes, and no studio could rewrite the ending. Lorne Greene was born in Ottawa in 1915, to parents who had already survived one escape from violent anti-Semitism in Russia, to start over in Canada with almost nothing. Their apartment was cramped, the winters brutal, and money was something you worried about every single day. His father, Daniel, repaired shoes in a tiny shop that always smelled like leather, glue, and damp wool. His mother, Dora, took whatever work she could find, sometimes sewing late into the night until her fingers ached, then getting up before dawn to start again. Every overdue bill felt like the one that might finally crack the family for good. In that narrow, drafty home, the boy who would one day own a vast ranch on television learned what it meant to have nothing secure and no safety net waiting. Long before audiences saw a man riding across thousands of safe acres, he was a kid watching his parents count coins at a wobbly kitchen table, listening to them whisper about rent, coal, and groceries, hoping those small metal circles would somehow stretch far enough. That constant quiet panic seeped into him and never fully left. One ordinary afternoon, the worry turned into something you could see, smell, and hear. A faulty wire in Daniel's little shop mixed with shoe polish fumes, and suddenly the walls themselves seemed to catch fire. Flames raced along the shelves, chewing through leather, tools, receipts, every scrap of paper that proved they still had a business. There was no generous insurance payout coming, just burned hands, ruined stock, and a landlord who still wanted his rent on time. Within days, they went from barely scraping by to not knowing where they would sleep next. They ended up in crowded charity housing, 12 families sharing air that always smelled of damp blankets and boiled potatoes, listening to other people cry through thin walls. Years later, friends said Lorne still woke from dreams full of smoke and sirens that never quite reached them in time. That fire did more than destroy a business. It branded one lesson into his mind. If someone else controls your paycheck, they control whether your family eats, freezes, or burns, and they rarely lose sleep over the outcome. At school, he was supposed to keep his head down, get good marks, and maybe grow into the kind of solid professional his parents could brag about. Instead, on a small wooden stage in a modest school play, he felt something electric flicker to life. Cast as little more than a background tree, he went off script and delivered a mocking speech aimed squarely at Ottawa's city politicians. He joked about crooked deals, hinted at local scandals, and turned his classmates into a roaring audience, laughing at names adults usually spoke in whispers. Some teachers laughed in spite of themselves. Others walked out in tight-lipped fury, already thinking about letters to his parents and threats about expulsion. In a single night, Lorne discovered two dangerous truths. His voice could make people listen, and it could put a target on his back that would follow him into staff offices and dinner table lectures. Once he had felt a room tilt in response to his words, going back to polite silence stopped feeling like an option. He had just learned that speaking up could cost him, but also change everything. When the Great Depression hit, jobs vanished, and even small dreams felt reckless. Lorne started haunting scrap yards and junk shops, collecting wire, tubes, and battered metal boxes to build radios in basements and coal cellars. By candlelight, he twisted copper, soldered joints, and listened to distant stations drift in from cities he had never seen. After midnight, when the house was finally quiet, he pretended he was the announcer, reading headlines into a tinny homemade microphone, practicing pacing, tone, and authority while shadows jumped on the walls. To him, it was magic, proof that a voice could cross miles and matter to strangers he would never meet. To his exhausted mother, it was madness. She had seen relatives chase show business and come home broke and bitter. Arguments exploded in their cramped rooms, raised voices, slammed doors, threats to smash that strange little world he was building out of junk. Every time he rebuilt a radio, he was secretly rebuilding a future his parents did not trust or dare to picture for him. Deep down, he felt that this fragile skill might save him. By the time Lorne arrived at Queen's University, the safe path was already mapped out for him: chemical engineering, a steady career, maybe a quiet life free from the chaos his parents had survived. But the Campus Drama Guild tugged at him harder than any laboratory equation. He slipped into rehearsals the way most students slipped into parties, memorizing lines with the same intensity he once used to solder radio wires in the dark. Behind his parents' backs, he switched from engineering to languages and theater, knowing full well how furious they'd be. It wasn't rebellion, it was instinct. He felt alive only when speaking words meant to move people. His father called it foolish. His mother called it dangerous. But Lorne recognized something neither of them saw. A voice could be a livelihood. A voice could be armor. And if he didn't chase this path now, he'd spend the rest of his life wondering whether he belonged in a workshop or on a stage. When Lorne landed a job at CBC as a young announcer, he thought he'd simply found steady work. Instead, he stepped into a role that demanded more emotional strength than any stage ever had. As World War II escalated, he became the man who read casualty lists, sinking ships, failed offensives, news that could break a family with a single sentence. His deep, steady tone earned him the nickname the Voice of Canada. But that quickly shifted to something colder: the Voice of Doom. Homes across the country froze when his broadcasts began, terrified the next name might be their son. Years later, he admitted those nights left scars he never fully shook. Reading tragedy daily taught him how powerful words could be, how badly people needed truth to feel human, and how dangerous it was to perform something shallow. It also reshaped his standards forever. If a script lacked honesty, he couldn't deliver it. Not convincingly. Not with that voice. After the war, instead of choosing the easier route and staying a respected newsreader, Lorne shocked everyone by risking his savings to create a school, the Lorne Greene Academy of Radio Arts. His goal wasn't fame. It was to teach young Canadians how to command a room, shape a sentence, and steady their voices under pressure. The Academy produced dozens of successful graduates, future stars like Leslie Nielsen among them. But success on stage didn't balance success on paper. Equipment costs swallowed profits, rent climbed, and tuition barely covered expenses. Lorne pushed on anyway, refusing to cut corners or lower standards. Eventually, after 7 years, he had no choice but to close the doors and sell the building. Outsiders saw failure. His students saw something else entirely. A man who believed their voices mattered enough to lose everything for. The collapse hurt him deeply, but it also hardened his resolve to chase work that wasn't just profitable, but meaningful. In his late 30s, when most actors were already established, Lorne moved to the United States and stepped straight into Hollywood's most unforgiving spotlight. Casting directors admired his commanding presence, but didn't know what to do with him. He was too serious for romance, too dignified for comedy, and too mature for leading man roles aimed at younger audiences. So he became the go-to authority figure. Judges, generals, rigid lawmen, characters with more posture than personality. The money was inconsistent, the recognition even thinner. He took whatever roles kept him afloat, sometimes doing voice work under fake names just to avoid embarrassment. During those years, he often wondered if he'd gambled away everything he built in Canada. But each rejection strengthened the skill that would eventually define him: resilience. He learned how to deliver depth even in shallow roles, and he waited for the one project that needed not just an actor, but a man people instinctively trusted. When Bonanza was pitched in 1959, it wasn't the beloved classic we remember. It was a risky, expensive experiment. A color western airing in a tough time slot, centered on a widowed father and his 3 grown sons, didn't exactly sound like guaranteed success. Yet something about the script pulled at Lorne. He was offered the choice to play either the father or the eldest son, and after a long talk with trusted colleagues, he chose Ben Cartwright, believing the emotional weight of the family needed a strong, steady center. But once filming began, doubts crept in. Early reviews were lukewarm, the show hovered near cancellation, and Ben felt stiff, distant, almost hollow. Lorne watched these weak scripts and felt that old wartime ache, words that didn't mean anything. He feared the show was slipping toward failure unless something changed fast, and he wasn't willing to let another dream burn out just because no one else saw the danger coming. After a string of early episodes, Lorne realized something alarming. Ben Cartwright felt less like a father and more like a wooden monument delivering tidy moral speeches. The scripts had him lecturing one moment and drawing a gun the next, with almost no emotional bridge between them. Viewers weren't connecting, and deep down, neither was he. Finally, Lorne pulled the producers aside and delivered an ultimatum that shocked them. Either give Ben vulnerability, real warmth, quiet doubts, private fears, or start looking for a new lead. It wasn't ego talking. It was a man who had witnessed real human suffering, refusing to fake it on screen. The writers reluctantly rewrote Ben as a father who questioned himself, comforted his sons, and tried to choose kindness over violence. Slowly, audiences began to respond. Ratings crept upward, and suddenly the show felt alive. That turning point didn't just save Bonanza. It carved out the version of Ben Cartwright that millions would come to love. To viewers, the Cartwrights looked inseparable, a perfect frontier family. But behind the cameras, tensions simmered, especially between Lorne and Pernell Roberts, who played Adam. Pernell felt the show had become too safe, too predictable, too afraid to push for the emotional truths he believed real families faced. He challenged scripts in meetings, questioned moral shortcuts, and refused to let Adam become a cardboard son delivering lines without weight. Lorne, who valued structure and responsibility, saw these outbursts as disruptive. Their arguments built slowly, episode after episode. Sharp exchanges during rehearsals, long silences at read-throughs, producers stepping in to cool tempers. The conflict grew so intense that crew members sometimes walked between them to break the tension. Purnell eventually chose to walk away from the show, leaving fans stunned. But privately, everyone knew. Adam Cartwright didn't leave because he didn't care. He left because he cared too much about what the show should be. Despite their clashes, some of Purnell's frustrations echoed Lorne's deeper beliefs. Lorne knew entertainment could shape how people saw the world. He'd lived through a war where words changed lives, so he pushed the writers to craft stories that meant something, even when the network preferred easy shootouts. Under his quiet pressure, Bonanza began tackling issues most Westerns ignored: racism, injustice, compassion for outsiders, and the courage to stand against the crowd. Episodes defending Chinese workers, native families, and wrongly accused strangers challenged audiences in ways television rarely attempted. For the early 1960s, it was bold, controversial, and sometimes risky. Letters poured in, some praising the show for its heart, others furious that a family Western dared to get political. Lorne absorbed the backlash and kept pushing. He believed the Cartwrights should choose mercy before violence, because that was the message America actually needed. He wasn't just playing a father, he was shaping the moral spine of the entire show. Dan Blocker, who played Hoss, wasn't just another cast member. He was the emotional anchor of the set. His warmth, humor, and gentle nature made the Ponderosa feel real, both on screen and behind it. When he died unexpectedly in 1972, the loss hit like a hammer blow. For Lorne, it felt as though a piece of the show's soul had been torn away. He'd watched Dan grow from an energetic newcomer into the character fans adored most. Suddenly, the family at the center of Bonanza was missing one of its strongest pillars. Lorne privately believed the series should end there, while the audience still remembered the Cartwrights as whole. But NBC pressed on, trying to reshape a series that no longer felt complete. Every day on set felt different, quieter, heavier, like walking through a familiar house with one bedroom permanently dark. No rewrite, no new character could fill that absence. Something irreplaceable had been lost. As the emotional strain mounted, the business side of the job took on new weight for Lorne. Memories of his family's burned shop and the years of scraping by had never fully left him. On Bonanza, he negotiated every detail: salary, syndication rights, profit participation, script input. To some cast and crew, it looked like smart professionalism. To others, it felt like he was slowly becoming the real-life patriarch, the quiet authority everyone had to answer to. But every clause, every demand came from the same place: fear of ever being powerless again. He had watched his parents lose everything in a single afternoon, and he refused to let instability creep back into his life. He wasn't chasing luxury. He was chasing safety. Yet that determination created a distance around him, a wall built from caution and survival. It protected him, but it also made some colleagues feel as though the man playing America's dad was drifting out of reach. Off-screen, Lorne's life looked nothing like the stable universe Ben Cartwright ruled with calm authority. His first marriage had unraveled after years of strain, and the tabloids seized on whispers of affairs, travel companions, and late-night meetings. For a man whose public image depended on being the moral center of American television, those headlines cut deeper than most people realized. He threw himself into work, rewriting scenes to emphasize forgiveness, responsibility, and second chances. Messages he wished he could deliver as cleanly in real life as he did on TV. Castmates noticed a new weight in his performances. a softness in his eyes whenever Ben talked about regret. Viewers felt it too, though they didn't know the source. Greene wasn't acting, he was processing. Every speech about family, loyalty, and the cost of mistakes carried echoes of his own guilt. The perfect father figure America adored was built on a man fighting private battles, hoping audiences never saw the cracks forming underneath. After more than a decade on air and hundreds of episodes filmed, Bonanza deserved a farewell worthy of the family it had created. Lorne imagined a final ride across the Ponderosa, a closing conversation between father and sons, maybe even a gentle sunset scene that allowed Ben Cartwright to lay down his burdens. Instead, the end arrived abruptly. Ratings slipped, executives shifted priorities, and suddenly production was halted, with barely enough warning to pack personal belongings from dressing rooms. There was no last script, no tearful cast table read, no closing monologue, just the quiet announcement that the final episode had already aired. Lorne felt blindsided. After years of protecting the show, shaping its heart, and fighting for its soul, he believed the audience deserved closure. Instead, Bonanza simply vanished from the schedule. The man who spent his life guiding fictional families through loss was left with a strange emptiness. His greatest career chapter ended without a final line, a wound he carried far longer than anyone knew. Once the Ponderosa gates closed, Lorne faced a new challenge: convincing Hollywood he wasn't trapped inside Ben Cartwright's boots. Casting directors hesitated, unsure whether audiences could accept him as anything other than America's frontier patriarch. Instead of waiting for perfect offers, he leaned into roles that were messy, vulnerable, even unflattering. Characters cracking under pressure, men wrestling with guilt, figures far removed from Ben's stoic certainty. Some projects came and went unnoticed, while others earned quiet praise for the honesty he brought to them. What mattered to Lorne was the chance to stretch, to prove, to himself most of all, that he could be more than the symbol he'd spent 14 years embodying. Reinvention was difficult, sometimes lonely, often humbling, but it freed parts of him that had been locked behind Ben's upright posture and measured tone. For the first time in decades, Lorne could stumble, break, and rebuild on screen without disappointing the millions who once expected perfection from him. Then came a role no one saw coming. When Lorne accepted the part of Commander Adama in Battlestar Galactica, even longtime fans blinked. Ben Cartwright in outer space? But the more people watched, the more it made perfect sense. Greene's steady voice, shaped by years of wartime broadcasts, fit the tone of a leader guiding the remnants of humanity through catastrophe. The stakes were cosmic, but the themes were familiar. Family, loyalty, sacrifice, the weight of leadership. Younger viewers who'd never seen Bonanza met him here for the first time. To them, he wasn't a cowboy at all. He was the calm center of a collapsing universe. And for Lorne, it was liberating. No ranch sets, no Western tropes, no comparisons to sons who had come and gone. Just a man, a commander, and a voice strong enough to steady a frightened fleet. In the silence of deep space, he finally escaped the long shadow of the Ponderosa. As the years passed, Lorne could have retired quietly, collecting residuals and appearing at nostalgic reunions. Instead, he sought work that aligned with the causes he cared about most. Hosting wildlife and environmental series gave him a new purpose. Shows like Lorne Greene's New Wilderness let him use his voice, once the bearer of wartime tragedy, to protect something fragile and hopeful. He traveled to forests, plains, coastlines, speaking for creatures that couldn't speak for themselves. Families gathered around their televisions again, but this time his words weren't guiding fictional sons. They were guiding real parents and children toward a deeper respect for the natural world. For Lorne, this was the purest work he'd ever done. He wasn't portraying a hero. He was finally trying to be one. And after a lifetime of telling stories shaped by war, loss, and fear, he chose to spend his final chapter telling stories about preservation, beauty, and the fight to save what still remained. By the late 1970s and early 80s, the public finally understood what Lorne had given to television. Awards, honorary degrees, national recognitions, even commemorative stamps began stacking up like overdue acknowledgments. Canada embraced him as a cultural icon. Hollywood saluted him as a foundational figure of early TV. But friends noticed he never fully settled into the comfort these honors should have brought. He kept working, lending his voice to documentaries, advocating for conservation, and accepting roles that carried emotional purpose. He feared idleness the way some feared storms. To him, slowing down meant risking the same stagnation that ruined dreams back in Ottawa's cramped apartment. So he stayed in motion, speaking, teaching, narrating, long after many stars his age had taken refuge in quiet retirements. And though he rarely said it aloud, each new plaque or medal wasn't just an achievement. It was reassurance that he hadn't wasted his life chasing shadows. In 1987, as producers quietly began shaping a new Bonanza revival, Lorne was set to return in a role that would revisit the legend he helped create. He was older now, softer around the edges, but still carried that unmistakable authority audiences trusted. Then, without warning, his health collapsed after emergency surgery for a perforated ulcer. Complications spiraled into pneumonia, and the man whose voice had once steadied a nation slipped into a silence he wouldn't recover from. Fans learned of his passing through the same kind of somber broadcasts he once delivered himself. Calm voices, speaking devastating news. At his funeral, former co-stars stood together again in a quiet, private reunion the cameras never captured. It was the farewell Bonanza never filmed. Lorne Greene, who had spent a lifetime giving closure to others, left without getting the final monologue he'd earned. For millions, it felt like a missing chapter, a story interrupted mid-sentence. Look at today's television fathers, the stoic protectors in shows like Yellowstone, the leaders who balance land, legacy, and family with a mix of tenderness and iron. Whether viewers realize it or not, they're watching echoes of Ben Cartwright. Greene created a template built on earned authority, moral struggle, and a quiet vulnerability beneath the surface. Before him, TV fathers were often simple, comedic, or one-dimensional. He gave them depth, weight, moral conflict, and the courage to admit when they were wrong. Writers still borrow from his balance of strength and gentleness, that blend of responsibility and regret. Even modern anti-heroes trace their emotional complexity back to what Greene pioneered. His work didn't fade with the end of a Western era. It seeped into the DNA of television itself. Every time a father figure stares down impossible odds with love and fear in equal measure, a small piece of Lorne's legacy rides with him. Viewers saw a comforting father on screen, a man with steady eyes, a guiding hand, and a calm that seemed unshakable. But beneath that iconic smile lived a lifetime of scars. The fire that destroyed his childhood home, the crushing responsibility of reading wartime deaths aloud, the failure of his school, the fights behind Bonanza, the grief of losing castmates, and the collapse of his first marriage. His compassion was shaped by hardship. His authority grew from survival. The Warmth he offered audiences was forged out of experiences far colder than the Nevada sunsets behind him. That's why his performances felt so real. When Ben Cartwright comforted a grieving son or admitted fear, Lorne wasn't acting. He was speaking the truths he'd carried for decades. The man millions trusted as a symbol of stability had spent his entire life learning how to hold things together, even when everything around him was falling apart. So when you revisit the Ponderosa and see Ben Cartwright standing tall against another storm, remember what it cost the man behind him. Lorne Greene didn't earn that reputation through perfect lines or dramatic poses. He earned it through sacrifice, resilience, heartbreak, and an unshakable belief that stories could shape people for the better. Every lesson he delivered to his fictional sons came from wounds that never fully healed. Every moment of wisdom was carved from past failures, and every scene of strength came from a lifetime spent fighting fear, from poverty, from war, from irrelevance. In the end, his greatest legacy wasn't Bonanza or Adama or the wilderness shows. It was the blueprint he left behind, a reminder that true strength isn't loud. It's steady, patient, and forged in fire. And if you think his journey was remarkable, wait until you hear the hidden battles of the son who shaped the show's future. Michael Landon's story is a storm all its own.